Counterbalance mirror, huh?
Where's
real
Glenn?
Funny.
Where's Glenn?
Yeah, real funny, Glenn. The counterbalance mirror, huh?
Yeah.
All right.
Not quite sure what we did. What do we do to deserve this? Do you know anything?
I mean, I know a few things. What we did to deserve this, I have no idea.
Unaware. Sure.
The primary difference between these two, the good Dr. Penick has 2 Trinket Mages as his only creatures, whereas Michael Hetrick has 2 Snapcasters and 2 Vendilion Clicks as his only creatures.
Another interesting card in John's deck that you're not going to find in Michael's is John does have a Crucible of Worlds. So interesting to see that in here if he wants to go. Well, he has 1 Wasteland as well, so he can kind of get a land advantage that way and then start blowing up Hetricks if it comes down to it.
And that's a long, slow way to do it.
We're in for a long, slow match. So anything can happen. As both players are just playing land go in these sort of control mirrors here, as they always tend to do. We see a Caracas here from John.
Now I wonder if both players know the other is playing Blue-White Miracles, you know?
Relatively sure they do know that, yeah.
This Miracle strategy, picking up a lot of steam. I mean, it's pretty quickly moved to the front of like being one of the top tier strategies, right? Like we're seeing this even more than we're seeing the old Stoneblade decks, right?
Yeah.
I mean, has this mostly replaced Stoneblade?
For the most part, I would say yes. Like, they both do exist. There are Esper Stoneblade variants, Blue-White Stoneblade variants, but I feel like Miracles is really starting to take over as far as the Tundra control deck of choice. There are splashes to be had, of course. We've seen someone with a small splash of black earlier. These two gentlemen both have their red splashes for red elemental blast, but this looks to be the control deck of choice in Legacy right now.
With this much counterbalance running around, I wonder what that means for the any potential Hypergenesis players. If you got to fight through the counterbalance and potentially Rug Delver putting out an early clock, backing it up with lots of cheap permission.
As we do see a Sensei's Divining top here from Hetrick.
Is it possible that Hypergenesis deck is just not very well positioned?
You know, I'm not really sure. I know I spoke to James Spirit right before we went back on air. He lost his last match to a blue-white Delver deck, basically taking the standard deck with some changes to it. You know, adding in
Force
of Will, yeah, some stuff like that. Some small changes, but still had Delver, Secret Tank, Geist Saint Trap. As we do see the Crucible of the Worlds on the stack here from John, which will create a significant land advantage for him if it does resolve. An interesting card to fight over in this particular matchup.
As a note for people spamming us about the Four Horsemen stuff, you can play it. It is not actually tournament illegal, despite what people who utter utterances of excitement may tell you. You have to play very, very, very quickly in order to actually continue to progress the game in a meaningful way, but it can be done. You just can't skip to the end. You have to actually go through the motions and do it very quickly.
As the Crucible of the Worlds did not resolve. It was something that I had a feeling they were going to fight over. They did fight over briefly. Not much of a fight, of course, but it did not resolve.
It's a nice little grip from Hetrick. He's got Force of Will, Snapcaster Mage, and Oblivion Ring. Plenty of meaningful action. Do you think it's possible he was expecting to lose the fight over the Crucible and then have to O-ring the Crucible?
Maybe, yeah. As we see a Snapcaster Mage here on the end step from Hetrick.
Now, is this going to get a Brainstorm? Looks like it.
We're going to see a Brainstorm here from Hetrick as well. Snapcaster Mage looking to attempt to provide a clock, but of course in both of these decks you're going to find 4 copies of Swords to Plowshares, so any creature that is put into play is unlikely to live, as they don't have much to spend their swords on in the matchup.
It is one less card in his hand, though, for the purposes of brainstorming him back.
As we will see a Sensei's Divining top activation here as well. Hetrick okay with it. Hetrick going to clear it with the sacrificing of a Flooded Strand.
Now those are some islands.
That's my favorite island picture.
Yeah?
Even though I don't typically use an island in my Magic play, if I were, those would be the islands I'd use.
Very difficult to get them these days. I mean, how big was the print run on that?
Not large, and those islands are not cheap either. There's a reason I don't have them.
The original continent to get them from, of course. Those are from overseas, right?
Yes. As we do have an attack here for 2. Not willing to swords that just yet, but as you mentioned, having more cards in hand for Brainstorm, likely much more important. I feel like, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, the big spells that these guys are going to fight over are Jace the Mind Sculptor and Entreat the Angels. Would you agree with that?
And Counterbalance.
And Counterbalance, okay.
Yeah. But yeah, that's mostly it. Counterbalance, Entreat the Angels, and Jace the Mind Sculptor.
Any sense in fighting over Sensei's Divining Top?
Not usually. I mean, if you're just like, if you're just leaking permission, you got it, But it's a tough battle. That's when you're gonna have difficulty actually winning,
So we see a Brainstorm here revealing a Wasteland, another Swords, and an Engineer Explosives. So
that Explosives giving him a line of defense against Entreat the Angels.
From what I can tell, John's hand, not really the best for this particular matchup, has found a lot of his cards that don't really have a high impact here, that have high impact other places. But Michael's hand looks to be the better of the two at this point. And we'll see another Flooded Strand there from Penick.
The good doctor continuing to develop his mana base. Hetrick not revealing his red yet. I think there's a good chance that Hetrick's going for a Jace the Mind Sculptor soon. He's trying to give himself as much interaction as he can beforehand, because this is a battle that he absolutely wants to win. Counterspell and Vendilion Click, as well as a top. So we could theoretically put the Vendilion Click on top, draw it, wait one more turn, end step the Vendilion Click, so that he's then sitting with a Vendilion Click and a Jace and a Counterspell and a Force of Will and a blue card.
So we're finally going to see these swords pull the trigger here on the Snapcaster Mage. And it seems like he's really going to want to defend that Vendilion Click. Now, Penick does have a Caracas in play.
Yeah.
It does change a little bit of how effective that Vendilion Click is going to be. So we see if I sacrifice a Flooded Strand searching for a basic island.
Yeah. Vendilion Click's main functionality in this situation is being able to hit Penick in the short run to, just take a look at what he's working with, and then later start doing it to himself to filter, so that if it gets bounced by Caracas, at least he's getting selection. In the end, though, really, it's just Jace the Mind Sculptor is what's going on.
We see a Counterbalance. One of the cards that could be fighting over. We'll see if Vendilion Click in response.
Yeah, he wants to, he's anticipating the battle going down over this Counterbalance, And
we do know that Hetrick does have a Counterspell on top of his deck as well, so.
Yep. If push comes to shove, he can top to go get it. Now, does Penick have 2 blue cards, or does he have 2 Force of Wills and another blue card?
I believe that's what it looks like here. 2 forces, 1 blue, and then the Wasteland in his hand, which he's kind of sandbagging, looking for a good opportunity to be able to blow up one of Hetrick's lands. As we're going to see Flooded Strand get sacrificed again, searching for a basic island.
Now, does this mean, is this going to be a Force of Will for the Vendilion Click?
This could just be a hardcast Force of Will, yeah. Just a 5 mana straight up. It's fighting time.
Thing is, Hetrick Force of Wills the Counterbalance. Lets this Force of Will and the Vendilion Click go. Force of Will the Counterbalance. A Force of Will from Penick back will be met with a top hitting Counterbalance. Top hitting Counterspell. No, he's just going to lead with the Counterspell.
as we see that here.
Counterspells the Force of Will. Interesting.
Vendilion Click, targeting Penick. You see just the one blue card, the Force of Will, Engineer Explosives, and a Wasteland.
Yeah, I don't know. I would rather have the. I'd rather keep the Force of Will and blue card in hand, just counter the counterbalance and not click him. You know? But that's all right.
Definitely different, multiple lines of play available here to Hetrick.
Absolutely.
The thing is, the also important thing here, Hetrick's hand is pretty stock loaded.
Yeah.
You see a Brainstorm, you see a Force of Will. There's also an Oblivion Ring to take care of the counterbalance once it does hit play if he wants to go that route, because there is no top in play. There is no Brainstorm in John's hand. And of course, Jace the Mind Sculptor being likely the most important card in the entire matchup, also in Hetrick's hand. If he lets the counterbalance resolve, it opens himself up to a little bit of variance, but it'll be interesting to see what he decides to do.
So he does take Force of Will.
Okay.
And we're going to see a Force of Will on this counterbalance, I can only assume.
As Penick draws Jace the Mind Sculptor after that.
Man, just imagine if he had let the Vendilion Click get countered the counterbalance, he'd still have a Force of Will and a blue card to protect his Jace the Mind Sculptor next turn.
Yep. We'll see if he's going to force this.
I mean, he does have Oblivion Ring to get rid of it, so he might not, you know? Yeah,
All right.
He chooses not to.
He has Oblivion Ring to get rid of it as long as things don't backfire on him.
Yep.
As we see an attack here for 3 by Vendilion Click, starting
Yep.
a real clock now.
Nah, I mean, the Caracas is going to slow down. The real clock is just going to be Jace the Mind Sculptor, whether or not it hits.
And here we go.
He needs a blind reveal of 4 so bad.
Force of Will's a 5.
5, wow. And he drew that 4 that would have been on top of his deck,
Yep.
if not for the click.
So we're going to see our first Brainstorm activation of Jace, first of likely many in this match. As some members of Umbrella Corps from Resident Evil walk by us with their heavy vests and their weaponry.
For those of you into the little children cosplaying, looks like we have a 5-year-old Spider-Man.
Very nice.
Those might just be pajamas, though.
So Jace is done doing its thing. We kick it back to Penick. Penick with a Wasteland here. I'm going to try to resolve a Jace of his own to Legend Rule the other one. We'll see a Force of Will here from Hetrick, removing the Brainstorm in his hand. Penick reveals the top card of his deck. It is a Terminus. Should not get it done. Jace is going to move to the graveyard. And this is where we move on to game 2. Penick conceding hastily because he knows that the game is going to take a little while.
And he's not beating that Jace.
Yeah, between Jace Brainstorming, Jace Fate Sealing, the game is going to take a little while, and time is of the essence in this match, so he's going to pack it up to Jace immediately.
Yep.
Looking at John's deck list, since he will be on the play this game, Red Elemental Blast, good start to counteract Jace,
Yep.
and the other blue cards here, 2 Oblivion Rings, 2 Vendilion Clicks, a Pithing Needle to a certain extent to be able to take care of top.
I don't think he can afford to do it, though. He needs his own top to be working.
Yes. I mean, it's just an option, you know, to catch him back up if he doesn't have a top or if he doesn't have a Jace. He also has an Engineer Explosives, which does not seem great in this matchup.
So I don't mind the explosives, just another way to get out of counterbalance.
Okay.
Like, it's not great, but so much of this matchup is about counterbalancing each other that having some answers like O-Ring and Engineer Explosives can be invaluable.
Just multiple answers to kind of break through that.
Yeah, and you don't really need all the removal, so you might as well have something, you know? And it does give you an answer to a Vendilion Click or a Snapcaster Mage that doesn't actually just rot in your hand the same way a Plow does.
Okay, I mean, I can definitely see him boarding out the Terminus. Probably wants to leave in a couple copies of Swords to hedge against the creatures, maybe. Maybe not, but you don't want to...
I'd rather just kill him with 3 Red Blasts, 2 O-Rings, and Engineer Explosives, plus the other Explosives main deck. And there's another O-ring main deck. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't want a single plow here.
Think you're going to be okay?
Yeah, maybe it's greedy, but...
Yeah, I mean, it's a risk that he's likely willing to take. How about on Hetrick's end?
He's got 3 Pyroblast and a Red Blast, but he also has, he's got another counterbalance, a 4th counterbalance, which I think is a A+ card there. He's got a Disenchant, which is a little tricky. I like O-Ring as an answer to counterbalance much more than Disenchant, just because 2s get countered so much more than 3s. But that said, Disenchant is an answer to an O-Ring. Surprise O-Ring, you know? He's got land tax, which it's not clear if that's the right way to go about this matchup, but it's definitely a powerful card if that, you know, if he wants to go that route. Vendilion Click, I think, will come in for sure, and Spell Pierce, I think, is an option. The nice thing about Spell Pierce is that it is particularly good at fighting Jace the Mind Sculptor.
And another reason, as you pointed out, that with that Disenchant, it does take care of a counterbalance, although it doesn't do a particularly good job of that. It also takes care of opposing O-Rings. But one card that Hetrick did Force of Will last game was Crucible of Worlds.
True.
A card that could give John a huge advantage, a huge land advantage. So I could see, because he did see that, I could see the Disenchant almost certainly coming in now. If there was any question of it prior, and I don't think there was much of a question, I think it is going to join us now.
Yeah, counterbalance, O-Ring, Crucible, there's plenty of good reasons. Not to mention if you catch an Engineered Explosive slipping.
Now we have seen, excuse me, during the course of the day, and even yesterday, how important playing first was. You know, it's very important in Standard. It is relatively important in Legacy as well. And a control mirror like this, and I know we had our little anecdote yesterday about you playing against Guillaume Waffletop and him choosing to draw against you. Is this a matchup where you would like to be on the draw, prefer to be on the play?
It is a matchup where I would like to be on the draw or prefer to be on the play. I would prefer to be on the play. Getting down counterbalance top early is so important, and sticking a Jace is just crucial. I mean, you're not always going to be able to do it on turn 4, but if the other person ends up in a position of weakness or stumbling at all, being the guy who's slightly ahead on mana is just... Because whoever sticks the Jace or the counterbalance top is usually the person who's going to win.
Okay. So preferring to play in this particular control matchup.
Yeah, I still think the majority of matchups in Magic you want to be on the play, even the control matchups. It's just really a question of if the card is worth more than the tempo, you know?
So we do see a Volcanic Island.
Draw-go matchups are much more about being on the draw.
Okay.
Like when all you're doing is just playing land and passing the turn. But these matchups are far from draw-go. Both decks, like look, Enlightened Tutor, these decks are playing card disadvantage cards and cards that don't even impact the board. These decks are much more about stick something degenerate, like a land tax, a counterbalance, a shackles, a crucible, a Jace. Stick something that can give you a game-winning advantage and ride that, you know?
So now this is where things are going to get a little bit interesting here, because we see a land tax from here from Hetrick. John has lands in his hand. He's opting not to play one because he does not want to give Hetrick the opportunity to get the advantage with the land tax. And we do see a counterbalance here from Hetrick now as he does opt to play a land. I'm not incredibly familiar with the land tax game. I'm not sure if you are.
Yep.
How do you feel about opting not to play his land there?
I think it's a fine play. If you look at his hand, he's got the kind of hand where if he just plays into land tax, he's going to be in rough shape. His hand isn't particularly good, and when your hand is bad, it's better to fight the land tax for a turn, make him break, or if you both just sit there, at least he's improving the quality of his hand over time. The thing is, Hetrick has the counterbalance, and was mostly using the land tax to buy himself time to sneak in the counterbalance. There is a small amount of selection he's going to get here because the random reveals are going to give him information about the top of his deck, which he might use if he decides to not land tax in some future turn.
And you definitely spoke of it. John choosing not to play the land, he had a counterspell in his hand, the actual card counterspell, and by not playing a second land, Hetrick took the opportunity, cast a counterbalance. John could not counterspell it, did not have Force of Will, and now that's in play, and it looks to be one of the more important cards in this matchup, even though he doesn't have a top in play just yet.
Take Kamikaze home with you.
Here's the top, and we're going to have
All
to see.
Kamikaze
Hetrick have a
merchandise
blind
is
2
now
on top. If he does,
50%
I think
off.
that's a Rizzy.
Visit the merch booth in the lobby. Get your souvenirs.
Trying to get a look at Hetrick's hand to see if he has a Force of Will here.
It's like mostly creatures, right? Like that's the Snapcaster Mage of Vendilion Click, and is that another Snapcaster Mage?
I believe that's exactly what it is. 2 Snapcaster Vendilion on a land, as we're going to see a hardcast counterspell, and what is likely an attempt with counterbalance revealing. Why do I think that's a counterspell?
Yeah.
I think that's because that is a counterspell.
Brutal.
Absolutely brutal by Hetrick.
So I think that this game is over before it started.
Well, we'll see. I mean, I'm looking at Penick's hand right now. I do see a Jace the Mind Sculptor here. There aren't a ton of 4s in Hetrick's deck.
True.
So if he's able to slide a Jace the Mind Sculptor underneath this soft lock of Counterbalance Sensei's Divine Top, he can conceivably get back in the game. Now there will be creatures pressuring the Jace, as we know there's two Snapcaster Mages and a Vendilion Click.
Very true. Most likely, I think we're going to see Hetrick. Yeah, Hetrick's got Pyroblast and Counterspell on top, but I was going to say, if nothing else, he's going to Vendilion Click on the end step Penick, you know. Actually, no, he's going to be a mana short, so. But he doesn't have red mana yet, although he probably has one in his hand. Yeah, he does.
He does have all in his hand.
Shipahala is definitely in the driver's seat on this one. He's got the Pyroblast and he has Snapcaster Mage to Pyroblast again next turn. Not to mention Vendilion clicking the first time Penick stumbles.
It's a difficult situation for Penick here. Michael has had a very good draw both games and has used his resources quite well in each game, fighting over the cards that are important, taking advantage of some of the cards that he sideboarded in with the land tax, forcing John to play a little bit more differently than he typically would, as we see a Vendilion Click here from Penick.
This is probably a top and response type of situation, you know?
Alright, we're just going to see a Red Elemental Blast here.
Doesn't even want to take a look. This seems so risky.
Now we're going to see a Vendilion Click over here from Mr. Hetrick. Now,
the problem, of course, is that he can Brainstorm and hide the Jace now.
That's true. He can Brainstorm, but also at the same time, Hetrick can just activate Sensei's Divine Top, put it on top, and counter the Brainstorm.
True.
As we may see the Brainstorm that you spoke of.
Now, the nice thing, though, about this, if he tops to counter the Brainstorm, now he knows the top is a 1, so he can stick his Engineered Explosives for 2 to get out of the lock.
Sure.
It's cost him almost everything he has, but at least he'll be out of the lock.
Yeah, which is key. He'll be out of that lock.
With a Jace in hand.
Yeah. He'll be out from underneath that. He'll also be out from underneath, like, land tax is kind of looming.
Yeah.
You know, it hasn't really done much this game, but Penick needs to assemble lands.
I was going to say, I think that it has already done its damage. It snuck the counterbalance in.
Sure.
And that alone is enough value to have made it all worthwhile.
As we see Hetrick letting the Brainstorm resolve, instead of electing to put the top on top of his deck to counter it.
Interesting.
So we see Penick move 2 Jace the Mind Sculptors to the forefront, 2 counterbalances looming in the back, along with a Brainstorm and a handful of lands. So Vendilion Click is going to resolve.
Doesn't.
Like.
It chooses, yeah.
Interesting also, as we spoke about a few turns ago, Jace, while it's going to be able to make it in play, as we take a look at Penick's hand of 2 Brainstorms, 2 Counterbalances, 2 Flooded Strands, a Brainstorm, and a Karakas, Jace would be under pressure from the creatures that are in Hetrick's hand.
Yeah. But
that Karakas is actually going to be able to, oddly enough, control the Vendilion Click and be able to hit Jace. Not in the best of ways of controlling it, of course, but if Jace is all that's important and having it retaining its loyalty counters, Karakas will do the job.
Absolutely. It's a tough way to do it, but it will do it. So if you're Hetrick, do you even take these? Like, you know that he put his gas on top. Maybe you just let him keep these and just suck it up and you know, face the fact that he's going to play a counterbalance this turn.
That's what it looks like he's done. See, Penick is going to...
Now the thing is Penick thinking, oh, he definitely has a 2?
Hetrick balance 2. The counterspell
Still has
again.
the counterspell.
Yep.
That's one of those situations where you've got to be tracking. You got to be tracking, keeping your eye on Hetrick to see if he's keeping the counterspell on top or not.
We're going to see a top on the upkeep. Likely to keep that counterspell within the top 3 cards of his deck and not one that he draws for this turn.
Oh, Pyroblast too. That's exactly what he wanted to see.
So we'll see what card Hetrick opts to draw this turn. And it is going to be that Pyroblast. And an attack for 3 here. Considering using Caracas, Vendilion Click, would you use it here?
I don't know. I don't have enough familiarity with this matchup, but it looks like Penick has decided that he is.
Penick gonna draw a card. Does not get hit by Vendilion Click in the draw step.
Yeah, I don't think I would. I think it's too. I think it'd be too valuable. Of course, if he would have got hit by the Vendilion Click, it would have taken Jace, but then it would have made him draw the explosives, which he could stick to get out of the lock. But I think it's too important to keep your Jace. You have to be pretty sure that he's not going to hit you with that Vendilion Click to take your Jace.
Well, the top of Penick's deck right now is the top 2 cards of his deck before he drew a card were Jace and Jace.
Was it Jace and Jace?
Yes.
Not Jace and explosives?
Correct.
Okay.
So I think what he was trying to do that turn was to induce Vendilion Click to click him, take a Jace. Yeah, tapping out, taking Jace, and he's like, great, another Jace, put it into play. What Penick doesn't know is that Hetrick has a Pyroblast in his hand ready to deal with the Jace. So there's a lot of posturing for position here between Hetrick and Penick. But by all accords, it looks as though Hetrick is in the driver's seat at this point as we see a Jace the Mind Sculptor being cast.
Good afternoon,
start with the top?
Kamikaze attendees.
Or do you just go straight
Brought
to
to you
the
by
Pyroblast?
Activision, a
start with the
Walking
top.
Dead video
I think he has
game.
enough mana to
One of
consider
our
starting
favorite
with the top.
sponsors wants to give you $10 off our zombie apocalypse course.
He
See if you
we can
can
also see
survive.
that too.
So Snapcaster.
Brought to you by
and
our
target
friends
Pyroblast.
at Activision. Do you dare?
You see Jace bite the dust.
Dr. Penick running out of counterplay.
And what you're also going to see here is a land tax activation if Hetrick does remember on the
Take
upkeep.
Kamikaze home with
And
you.
if he wants to
yeah, I was
clear
gonna say,
it.
Kamikaze
it's not
merch
clear
is
that he actually
50%
wants
off.
to. 3 basic
T-shirts,
lands would be nice.
iPhone covers,
He does
sweatshirts,
decide he's going
bags.
to do it.
All Kamikaze merchandise is 50% off.
It is,
Visit the merch booth in the front lobby.
it is certainly a risk to land tax there, you are correct, because I think he was relatively happy with the top of his deck.
Yeah.
There was a counterspell floating there.
Yep.
There was another Sensei's Divining top floating as well. But being able to hit his land drops here will allow him to basically get the rest of the spells out of his hand and be able to continuously activate Sensei's Divining top. So I can see reasons for both sides on a land tax activation or not.
Activating the top on his upkeep. So at least he does have a 2. Yeah, he does have a 2. More land.
So we're going to see an attack here from Snapcaster Mage. And one thing you can really tell here is that both these players are very well versed just in how this matchup goes. You know, and how they have to play their effects between counterbalancing and topping, when to fetch, all that stuff.
May I have your attention, please? Coming up in the 3rd floor screening room, room 411.
Penick giving up any
5
pretense of fighting the land tax.
Don't miss the Liberator.
Just wants to play around Spell Pierce.
Q&A
Drops
with
Jace the
Mr.
Mind
Lou
Sculptor.
Ferrigno following the screening.
Not even,
5 p.m.
not even a look
the
from
Liberator,
counterbalance
which is
to see what the
screening
3rd card down is.
Q&A
Go
with
straight
Mr.
to the
Lou
Pyroblast.
Ferrigno following the screening. 5 o'clock in screening room 411 on the 3rd level.
Now the top. See, I think when you're going to top anyway, you might as well look. Wouldn't have mattered here, though.
Yeah, I agree.
So no, he's going to draw another land, unless he wants to tax again. He does decide to draw the land. So he has a 1 and a 2 on top, having most of the cost shut down. He's continuing to put out a clock, but until he has Jace, it's not a wrapped up game. This Penick can still end up just, you know, using some explosives and O-rings to get out of this.
Yeah, I think explosives right now for Penick is his most important draw. As we see, I believe, a Trinket Mage draw.
Which can go get the explosives,
Which can
of
go
course.
get it. That's the one card he's going to need, as we do see a Vendilion Click here, a back-breaking Vendilion Click, honestly.
Well, I mean, he deserved this. He's the one. No, he does. You know, like he's the one who asked for this.
Yeah, he did bounce it back to his hand. as we may see a brainstorm here from Penick to maybe, hopefully, I believe Penick is trying to lead Hetrick into a misplay, but he opts not to, just reveals the hand of Brainstorm, Counterbalance, and Trinket Mage.
Yeah, I know this is highly flexible, but
Brainstorm coming down on in response here. No, not in response, just showing it, revealing Brainstorm, Counterbalance, and of course he takes the Trinket Mage knowing that the explosives is the primary thing that he needs to keep off the table.
And he draws into a Sensei's Divining Top.
Unfortunately, too late to the party.
Indeed. See what Penick can amass here. It's going to be difficult to get out of the situation that he's in right now. I feel like Engineered Explosives is just one of the only cards that he can really draw to get himself out of this rough situation that he's in.
I mean, primarily O-Ring and explosives, right?
As you see, Hetrick move some cards back and forth there. I believe he's leaving the Brainstorm on top of his deck to draw for the turn. Leaving him with a Counterbalance, a land, and a Mystery card as the third card for the Sensei's Divining Top. An attack for 5 will move Penick down to 9.
Penick with just 2 turns to try to both get out of this and stabilize.
But we're going to see Caracas return.
Okay, so
Return of
Penick's still
Vendilion
at
Clique.
12. He needs to just to buy himself enough time to even, you know, have chances to draw out of this.
We may see Vendilion Clique here again on the draw step.
Yep.
Funny how it's saving him points of damage, but it's controlling his draw step in such a way that it's going to be almost impossible for him to find that Engineered Explosives.
Yeah, it's not even clear you can really afford to be doing this.
We're going to see a top activation and a turn for Hetrick. Third card is a Sensei's Divining Top, so he is still going to have the 1s and 2s available to him. Likely to draw the land this turn, so he can have a 1 and 2 and then a Mystery card. And that is what he does. So there is a Sensei's Divining Top, a Counterbalance, and a Mystery card on top of his deck for Sensei's Divining Top. Caracas is going to bounce the Vendilion Clique once again, knocking John down to 10.
This is a tough way to do it, man.
Yeah, but again, as we see a Red Elemental Blast this time from John as his draw step. We're going to see a Brainstorm, and this is where he's going to try to induce a little bit here. But Hetrick has set things up properly.
Yeah, Penick was hoping he'd have to actually activate the top, and then in response to putting the top back on top, he Pyroblast the Vendilion Clique.
Indeed.
Or the Counterbalance, for that matter.
Either one would have worked in this situation.
But as it stands, the good doctor is colder than Colderson on Christmas Eve.
And now we're going to see an Entreat the Angels there from Hetrick, which is basically going to shorten this game in such a way that Penick may just concede once it is revealed.
I was going to say, actually, Entreat the Angels is one of Penick's best outs here, right?
Yes, without question. He
But
has
an
enough lands to make it relevant as well.
An Entreat out of Michael is probably going to be just too much for Penick to even have meaningful counterplay against.
And looking at Penick's deck list,
I guess he had Terminus.
he does have Terminus, yes,
Terminus?
some number of copies.
Terminus is hard to counter, buys him a ton of time. Although Hetrick might just be playing conservative and not put out the Entreat. You know, just beat him with the board, and then if something goes wrong, you have the Entreat in reserve.
And looking at Penick's deck list, he only does have 1 Entreat in his deck, where Hetrick does have 2. So it's unlikely that he does draw 1.
No, it looks like he's actually just going to end the game right here, right on the spot. If he just makes 2 Angels, by making 2 Angels here, that's lethal this turn, and he already knows Penick's hand.
Yep.
Even if he bounces the Vendilion Clique, that's 10.
4, 8, 9, 10.
Well, good match as far as counterbalance matches go.
Penick doing the math quickly here. we're going to see a red Elemental Blast on the Snapcaster Mage. So he's not dead quite yet.
Gotta play to your outs. After he Karakas' the Vendilion Click, he has a shot to Terminus next turn.
He's a shot to Terminus, and he's a shot to find and treat the Angels as well.
Yep. Never give up, never surrender.
As we see 2 Angel tokens hit play.
Hetrick having to give up his counterbalance lock in order to go for this kill.
Knocking Penick down to 2.
But he does have Vendilion Click to help seal the deal. And it looks like that's it. Force of Will's not going to help him.
And that's
Offers
it.
the hand.
Michael Hetrick, 2-0 in a blue-white-red Miracles mirror match over John Penick, moving Hetrick over to, I believe, 6-0. And
That is correct. I believe so.
Penick having his first loss on the weekend. Really interesting match there. Typically, blue mirrors are a little bit more boring. At least that's what people find. But I think that match was relatively interesting. A lot of posturing for position. The land tax interaction
Ended up
very,
being big.
very, yeah,
Having
very
enough mana. Yeah, getting him to skip the land drop and then Ancestral recalling later.
very, very big. Only 1 copy in Hetrick's deck and an Enlightened Tutor to find one, but you can just see the impact of land tax, it being unbanned, what kind of impact it can have in a control mirror.